Hey everyone, it looks like the recording is in progress, so we're back on the screen. I hope you had a nice week away from class, but now we're back in school. So to let you know, today's subject matter, we're going to deal with Africa. And it's a few kingdoms in Africa and religious aspects and trade. So it should be very interesting. And this class is scheduled for 7/26/21, meaning July 26, 21. So without further ado, let me get to the material. Okay, let me minimize myself first because we don't need to see me, right? It doesn't want, there we go. See, I'm gone. Thank you. But you can hear my voice. Okay, so well, I was going to start the slideshow, but I guess I'm already set up for the beginning. Wow, I jumped a step ahead. Isn't that nice? Okay. What's this say? Today's lesson is nothing, huh? No. Okay, so world civilizations too. Okay, I'm not mentioning this right here. You can see that for yourself. Okay, ready to roll. So Africa from Axum to 1400. Okay, all right. It's getting a little hot in here, so I'm putting my aircon on. I'll read the sidebar later. So here we go. The historiography of Africans has made impressive advances in the past 50 years. The greater part of the continent, remember Africa is a continent, that's how large it is, and it's many different countries. A lot of people, at least American people, with not a lot of international geography and history, they just think Africa's one country, right? One place, one people. No, okay? The greater part of the continent's people had no written language until relatively recent days. So like a lot of other cultures, everything was done orally, right? As far as history was. Historical research in the usual literary or written sense was therefore difficult because these records didn't exist. But a combination of new methods of obtaining information about the past and new techniques for using that information has changed the situation radically or greatly. Now, archaeology, historical linguistics, which is languages, art forms, and oral traditions have brought considerable illumination or light to Africa's past. And these sources are gradually revealing an extraordinary panorama of peoples and achievements. Extraordinary because so many different various groups with histories and interlinkings with other peoples. Some African areas like Ethiopia, heavy into Christianity. Other areas that we'll learn in the Sudan or what have you, Islam. So very diverse. Continuing, social organization and early state formation. In sub-Saharan Africa, the basic unit of society was not the nuclear family like in Western societies, what America inherited from Europe, but the clan or lineage, which is like your line. You can have a historical lineage, you know, which is a much larger unit, supposedly descended from a common ancestor. So we're going way back on these. Children took their names from and had specified status and rights through their lineage. Some societies seem to have followed patrilineal descent, meaning descent and rights determined by the father's bloodline. But others followed matrilineal descent, names and rights received from the mother's side. Clans lived together in compounds that grew in time to become villages. Okay, so at the bottom of the page, So you know I've got questions, and I guess you guys are in luck this week because I got long questions to write and you got short answers to write. So again, I'm being too kind, right? All right. So here we go. Whiteboard. Question 1. And let me see if I can stretch this. Can I make it a onesie? Oh, yes, I did. Okay, so the history of Africa has done what in the last 50 years? Okay. My funny guys, please don't tell me stuff like, well, they opened up McDonald's and I think there's a Chick-fil-A and maybe a Panda Express. No, those are not the answers. Ready for question 2? Okie dokie. Question 2, in sub-Saharan Africa, what was the basic unit of society? And again, I'm going to attempt a stretchy pose here. Why not be able to do this one? Let me see. Oh, Jimmy. Oh, I did. Okay. So again, what's the building block of the society, right? Was it all single men, all bachelors, or all single ladies that refused to get married, no matter how handsome the man was, and that built the society? You know, give me your best guess. I'll give you a few to answer. Okay, you think you got a grip on those? And it's time for me to go for the eraser. So repeating, the history of Africa has done what in the last 50 years? Okay, give me the important information, not the silly information. That's done. 2, repeating, in sub-Saharan Africa, what was the basic unit of society? Again, what built the society? What was the society built on? Okay. That's gone. Okay, let me turn to the material. This is where we stopped on the bottom, where it says in time to become villages. Oh, I can go through the sidebar like I like to do. Again, you will not be tested on this information. You don't have to know any of these dates. It's just for your own edification. 1005 to 700 CE, Kingdom of Axum. 300 to 1100 CE, Kingdom of Ghana. 800s to 1200s, many Swahili city-states founded. 500 CE, origins of Sudanese kingdoms, trans-Saharan trade increases, and we will learn who they traded with. 700s to 800s, Muslim conquest of North Africa. 900s to 1400 CE, Great Zimbabwe flourishes. 800s, conversion of West Sudanese and Swahili to Islam begins. 1250 to 1450 CE, Kingdom of Mali flourishes. Right? So it said villages or towns. People occasionally formed guild-like organizations to specialize in certain craft, such as iron or copper smelting. It's when you melt it. Pot making, basketry, salt making, or even regional or long distance trade. But most clans depended on either farming or herding activity to sustain them. So farmers and herding livestock. Several clans made up an ethnic group, sometimes called a tribe. And the local village was usually the keystone of all social organization and responsible for enforcing the rules of daily life, what many would call government. Because age was highly venerated, which means respected, which has not really been a strong thing in American society, unfortunately, and it's only gotten worse. It was customary for the clan elders to make most of the important decisions for the village. Although everyone usually had a right to participate in deliberations, and matters were usually discussed until a consensus, which is like a majority, opinion was reached. Religion and the maintenance of social order were closely linked. But we know little about the exact practices that were followed in the remote past, because remember, almost nothing of written documents. Religious sacrifices were demanded before any important action was taken. Excepting the Christian Northeast, the northeast part of Africa, animism in a multiplicity of forms was universal before the influence of Islam began to be felt in the 9th century. Arab travelers' accounts tell of the shocking freedom, to Muslims at least, of women in African society in the 10th through 13th centuries. So these Islamic Arab travelers were like, wow, these African women have a lot of freedom. You know, Islam is very strict in many ways for women, but they were shocked what they found here in Africa. There was no attempt to seclude women except among some upper class Muslims or to restrict them from business dealings. As a rule, women were subordinate, which means they did the will of men in public life, although they exercised the right to be heard on public issues. Also, there were instances when women occupied positions of power, listen to this, within African states. For example, as queen mothers or even occasionally as rulers. Women played a much stronger hand in the family and in the economies of their communities. They enjoyed rights equal to men's in the life of their clans, particularly when it came to rights of access and inheritance of clan resources like land and livestock. Because women performed most of the work on the family farms, they organized local markets for the sale of their produce. In this capacity, they played a crucial part in regional trade, which we'll find out becomes very important. Male polygamy was the universal rule, which means he could have as many wives as he wanted, I guess. And the number of wives a man had was taken as a sign of wealth and social status. Wow. I think today, if a man had a lot of wives here in LA, it would be a sign of bankruptcy. Taking additional wives as a man matured was considered a natural and desirable way of extending his kinship network. Kinship meaning family. It's an old term. The offspring or children of these unions were considered the responsibility of the females, thus reinforcing the prevalent African custom of seeing the clan rather than the nuclear family as the primary unit of social life. When African people fell under the sway of Islam, women's personal and public lives were controlled more closely. Moreover, where matrilineal descent existed, it was usually replaced by patrilineal descent, and women's rights of inheritance were reduced to the general rule of Islamic law that restricted a woman's inheritance to only half that of a man. So maybe the women were not happy when Islam started taking over these countries. They're like, whoopsie, we're losing our power. Early European explorers, traders, remarked on the existence of large numbers of people throughout sub-Saharan Africa, okay, without any form of what they recognized as government. So it's like a vast group of people. So imagine LA. You see people living everywhere, but it's like there's no Hollywood. There's no downtown LA. There's no K-Town. There's no WeHo. What's going on here? That's not how they lived. Perhaps as many as 1/4 of the African population, it has been estimated, lived in such apparently stateless, so if it's stateless, it's cityless societies at the advent or beginning of the Europeans. In making their judgment, the newcomers looked for the earmarks or signs of government which they were familiar with in their European homelands. Monarchs or kings surrounded by subordinate officials, tax collecting systems, defined frontiers. So like I said, Hollywood begins here, K-Town starts here, WeHo begins over here, but that wasn't the case. Permanent military establishments and most important written laws. Again, they weren't writing things down. Europeans said, where's all this stuff? They also assumed that the larger the state, the more advanced must be its civilization. These assumptions or easy word guesses or theories led most Europeans to conclude erroneously or mistakenly that Africans must be severely retarded or slow, backward in their political development, as some or most of these elements of the state were lacking in the sub-Saharan civilizations, especially when they did not have a written language. Scurry, right? Scurry stuff. So, continuing, what can we say today about the early Europeans' assessment? In fact, social controls necessary for the peace and security of any large group were always present, but were unrecognized by the Westerners, Europeans, who came to Africa during the colonial period or era. In the absence of written laws, controls typically would have included conflict and dispute by medicine men, or what we call today shamans, or women having spiritual access to clan and village ancestors. Social rules and norms that regulated rights and duties between kin groups or lineages when their members were involved in a dispute or argument, and certain duties and privileges accorded or given to an age group. In all or several of these fashions, the village elders were usually performed the functions. Okay, now if you remember here, like, okay, there's the yo-yo. So here's the previous, right? That's a whole long page, right? And then we got this one. So I got 2 questions for you. Okay. A lot of reading. So pencil. Question 3. See, I'm going to write a long one, and your answer is not going to be anywhere as long. Okay, in Africa, in the 10th through 13th centuries, Arab travelers were shocked by what? What did they see that shocked them? Oh, I guess it's too late here to move this baby. Oh, sensitive. So I can't stretch it. Sorry. So anyway, what did these Arab Muslim travelers see and say, what's going on here? We don't have that back home. So wrap your mind around that. I think I illuminated that quite a lot when I spoke about it. Okay, so let's move on to question 4. Okay, I'll try to stretch this immediately, see if it will help me. Oh, there we go. Maybe I'll make it a twosie. I'll leave it a twosie. Okay. So who performed the functions that states and officials did in Europe? Quite different group of people performed these things in Africa, not with the Europeans. So question 3, Islamic Arab travelers were shocked at something. And 4, Europeans were shocked to see something done in a different way. So let me give you some time to answer those. So this is our last week before August. And I tell you, at least for me, I guess I started feeling this way maybe about 15 years ago, when I was 15 years old. Anyway, so about 15 years ago, I started feeling this way, that for me, this time of year because like I said, it's going to be August after the next week. In fact, the weekend will be August. Wowzers. That's for me, that's the fastest time in the year. You start the year and it always starts slow and you're still caught in this like fog, like, oh, it's still the year before. I can't, you write bad checks. You instead of like when it's this January, you can get in the habit of writing your checks, paying your bills for 21, and then they'll send it back and say, this is 22 now, right? And then, the summer goes long. But from August through the end of December, to me, it goes the fastest. That's when you start having like the college football in August and professional football starting. And then you have that Columbus Day in September. And then the summer's over and people are dancing in the street. And then people are getting ready for Halloween. And then 3 weeks from Halloween is Thanksgiving. You get your turkey. And then the next day from that, you start Christmas shopping and getting your tree. And then it's Christmas. And then it's a week later, it's the start of the new year. So we're going to go to the fast time now. Okay. Even though we've been hit with this heat wave. So let me get the eraser. I think that's giving you enough time. So repeating, in Africa in the 10th through 13th centuries, Arab travelers were shocked by what? What did they see that shocked them? 4, who performed the functions that state and officials like a government did in Europe? Who performed these things in Africa? Was it Temujin? No, I don't think Temujin did that. Okay, so let me go back up here. All right, back to the material. So we stopped here on the bottom that said functions that early, okay. Europeans normally expected a state and its officials to discharge. Wow, so right at the end there, I gave you the answer. So that should be, as the elementary school kids say, that should be easy peasy, lemon squeezy, okay? So here we go. Where states did emerge or come out or form, they were typically organized around the principles of what some scholars called Sudanic kingship. These had no bureaucracies, which means, you know, the government and its red tape machines. Like you could call like the DMV a bureaucracy. You know, they'll send you crap right away because you're going to get a ticket or get penalized, but you send in your stuff for your license and you got to wait, you know, forever. So they had no bureaucracies. However, they did include large numbers of court functionaries who individually did not have the king's power, but whose collective their collective will could negate or stop that of the king if they believed his actions had exceeded the bounds of custom or propriety, his power. Typically, these included such figures as the Queen Mother, a prime minister, look at that, a royal historian and praise singer, royal drummers, commanders of the army, diviners, those are people that predict the future, keepers of court protocol or court rule, and medicine men and women, again, a shaman. If you're old enough, you probably don't remember please don't squeeze the shaman. The king was a member of a royal lineage that enjoyed great prestige or respect, fame, or more commonly was thought to be sacred. It's almost like a god. He acted as an intermediary between the living and the dead, performed sacerdotal duties, that's like your religious, like a bishop, and disclosed the wishes of the royal ancestors through divination, which means either through a dream or taking a drug and having a vision, or spirit possession, being possessed by a spirit, maybe of an ancestor. Maintaining the ritual purity and strength of the king was thought to be essential to the welfare of the land and the people. And a weak, sick, or aged king threatened the state, threatened the stability, that it could be maybe destroyed or weak, not strong, to keep society in check. Therefore, he could be deposed, which means taken away from his kingly position. Usually, too, the divine king was surrounded by symbols of office or regalia, which means, you know, royal clothes, royal furniture, royal, you name it, all the things of royalty. That's the regalia. These typically, but not always, would have included ivory horns. that were blown on ceremonial occasions. So, they're blowing these horns. They said horns, not tusks. If they said tusks, that's from an elephant. So horns, maybe from water buffalo, wildebeest, royal drums, ceremonial swords, umbrellas or fans, and a palanquin on which he was transported. You're like, what is a palanquin? Is that a new donut down at the California Donut on the, what is that, 6th Street or Mola? No, that's the Asian countries had it too, but Asians had like a basket. Sometimes you couldn't see the woman. Maybe she had to open a window, and you had like 4 men carrying her, these 2 long sticks, and she sat in the box. So it's that kind of thing. That's what that is. All right, so proceeding. All right. We're on to, let me make sure I know where I'm at. I should be at Axum. Okay. But before we get into that, I guess I squeezed one more question, and don't be angry, but I have to give you a certain amount of questions and cover the important topics. So let me squeeze the one before I get into Axum, because Axum has its own question. Okay, it's quite a lot of material I was reading there. So I just read about the Sudan. This would be question 5. I can stretch this one, make it a onesie. There we go. List some people involved in Sudanic kingship. I could have said name some, so it's the same meaning. So I just read a list of people who would be involved in Sudanic kingship. So just give me some of them. And again, if I have new students that I've never had before, just to let you know, like my regular students, let's say there's a list, right? This is a good practice for your midterm and your final. If there's a list and you write one, right, of the list, only one, you're probably not going to get a lot of points, right? Let's say you won't get as much as the person that writes 3. So, if there's a long list and, you at least write 3, if you can write more, the more you write, the more points you get. So it's entirely up to you, right? All right, let me give you a minute to write that. All right, you think you got a hold of that one? Okay. Okay, I have the eraser. Repeating, list some people involved in Sudanic kingship. Give me that list. And again, my funny guys, I don't want, well, Justin Bieber, Kanye West, Marky Mark, and the Fun Bunch, right? No. All right, that's done. Now we can get into as I move my paper to keep abreast, and I don't mean chicken breast. We're at Axum. Okay. All right, good deal. By the 1st century CE, a rival power, like an enemy, was rising on Kush's eastern flank, Axum. in the Ethiopian highlands and was the main city of a kingdom that had been established when local people and immigrants from southwestern Arabia arrived and intermarried during the last centuries BCE. After establishing its own Red Sea port at Adulis, Axum was the earliest part of sub-Saharan Africa to be drawn into the international trade complex centered on India. As a result of the wealth it reaped or gained by the 300s, it had grown strong enough to challenge Kush for the control of the Red Sea trade and the Upper Nile corridor. About 350 CE, Axum conquered Kush. The kingdom flourished until the 8th century, after which it gradually descended into oblivion, or oblivion means it doesn't exist anymore, and was abandoned. Everybody left it. The city's sparse ruins, which means few, were not rediscovered until the late 18th century by the earliest European explorers. The rise of Axum coincided or happened at the same time with its conversion to Christianity by Byzantine missionaries. Only a generation after Constantine accepted the faith, King Ezana of Axum made the same choice. Thus began the extraordinary history of Christianity in Ethiopia. The modern name for Axum and its surrounding lands. It is the oldest and most distinctive version of that religion in all of Africa. Okay. Later centuries, where's my arrow here? Okay. The rugged mountains and physical isolation of much of the country enabled Ethiopians to hold off or fight off repeated Muslim attempts to conquer it. So we had the Muslims conquering in Northern Africa, but in this area, the Christian Ethiopians were strong enough to fight them off, both from the Nile Valley and the Red Sea coast. It also allowed the growth of a unique legend of royal descent, the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopian Christian kings. I don't want to see how I'm going to say this. Okay, that commenced in biblical times and lasted until an army rebellion in 1970. Wow. Whew. Like its predecessor, Axum depended for its prosperity or wealth or success on its function as an exchange depot or spot for the Indian Ocean, Red Sea trade, as well as the Nile Valley route. In the 6th century, about the time Muslim prophet Muhammad was born, that's how far we're going back here, Axum had become strong enough to cross the Red Sea and conquer southwestern Arabia. I bet a lot of people didn't know that. However, the 7th century Arab conquest of Egypt and South Arabia changed the situation dramatically. And within a century, Christian Axum was driven from its Red Sea coast and under siege, which means under attack. From the 8th century, Arab Muslims dominated the seaborne trade. Nubian society, which had gradually matured into 3 small states of Noba, Makuria, and Aloha, took Axum's place along the Nile. Little is known about them except that they converted to Christianity through Ethiopian influence in the 7th and 8th centuries and managed to hold out against Muslim pressure until as late as the 1200s in some areas. Throughout this lengthy period, excuse me, from Axum's fall to the coming of Muslim hegemony is a one style society, right? It would be all Islamic. In the Upper Nile, a diminished commercial trade, which means it lowered along the Great River bound Egypt with its southern borderlands in Nubia and the Sudan. But the level of urban sedentary life reached by the Kushite and Aksumite kingdoms was not again approached in Northern Africa. So in other words, the great lifestyle that these folks had after the Muslims kept on attacking and things changed, they never had that level of fantastic lifestyle or rich, opulent lifestyle ever again. Okay, so I spoke about Axum, and I have to ask a question on it. So let's get back to the whiteboard. Okay. So this is question 6. Sorry, 6. Yeah, see about stretching this baby. Make it a Tuesday. Okay. Axum was the earliest part of sub-Saharan Africa to be drawn into what? So again, don't be confused by this. Drawn into, are they talking about drawing with a pencil? I'm using these exact words so you can find the answer in the reading, okay? All right, so that's one. Do I have 2 Axum questions or just one? Okay, I'll sneak the other one. I'll give you 2 on Trans-Saharan. Okay, so that's my only one from Axum. All right, so take a minute on that. Okay, grab the eraser. Repeating, Axum was the earliest part of sub-Saharan Africa to be drawn into what? Okay, question 6 is done. Let's move on to the, as you will see, Trans-Saharan trade and early kingdoms of the Sudan. Trade runs like a golden thread throughout the history of Africa. Agriculture and livestock breeding were their cornerstones or main points of daily existence for most Africans. Whenever regional states and kingdoms overlaid village life, trade was one of the primary bases on which kingly or queenly authority relied. Africa exported few manufacturers internationally, but local production and export of high-value commodities like gold, ivory, animal hides or skins, processed and unprocessed, dyes, gums, and aromatics, as well as the traffic in human beings, meaning slavery, created a lot of wealth. As in the case of Africa's earliest state, Egypt, when ambitious individuals were able to control and tax such wealth, they could wield enough or force enough power to extend their sway or control over large populations. Goods that Africans imported, likewise, often became symbols of prestige. Again, I went over that word earlier, and power that kings could regulate and control to their political advantage if these were especially prized and not locally obtainable. So getting all these foreign riches really improved your status, right? I guess in a small way, like let's say, let's say whatever country you're from, let's say you're from an Asian country, right? And then you're getting all these Prada and Gucci and Mercedes-Benz and what have you. If you're able to afford that stuff with all the high tax that comes from their original European countries and the shipping all the way to Asia, I mean, they do the same thing to the United States, then you have prestige. People say, wow, that person's driving what's the new one, the Tesla? Or they have the $25,000 Rolex. Oh my God. So same thing here. Besides women and livestock, political power in Africa rested on control over imports like salt, dates, weapons, Chinese porcelain. Don't talk about Africans getting Chinese porcelain. Interesting. Textiles and beads. All this means that large portions of Africa maintained links to the larger world through international trade and commercial networks. That's an important area right there. Africa maintained links to the larger world through international trade and commercial networks. A lot of times in history, they just say, no, Africa was asleep at that time. They wasn't doing anything. No, internationally connected. As we shall see, the earliest trade was in the Nile Valley and the Mediterranean world, so they traded together. Then with the rise of trading states of the Western Sudan, the coastal Swahili, and the great Zimbabwe, these contacts extended to a wider Islamic commercial nexus that covered the Eastern Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean community, and Asia. The Sudanese kingdoms were a series of states that were formed starting about 400 CE in the bulge of West Africa below the Great Sahara Desert. Here, iron tools, good soils, and the transport afforded by the Niger River enabled agriculture to advance and provide for a rapidly growing population. And some of the first cities south of the Sahara at Takrur, Kumbi Saleh, and Jenne. In the early century CE, gold was discovered in the Senegal River region. And early trans-Saharan trade routes developed that connected the Western Sudan with North Africa. In the late 7th century, Islam established itself in North Africa, like I mentioned, in the Western Sudan, and Muslim, Berber, and Arab merchants brought Western Sudan into an international commerce system that eventually spanned Southern Europe, Africa, and Asia. As in the Nile Valley, trade supported state information. 3 of these kingdoms are especially well known to the modern historians: Ghana, Mali, Kanem Bornu. We don't know too much about Kanem Bornu or Songhai, but Ghana and Mali. That's important. Okay, so I have finished the Sub-Saharan. So I've got 2 questions. Okay, here we go. I'll get that pencil. This would be question 7. Let me make sure I'm reading this one correctly. I don't want to misquote the material. I want you to be able to find the answer. Okay, got it. Oops. Just getting ahead of myself. Try to make this a onesie. There we go. I can do it. Wish me luck. Bingity bongity. Go. Okay. Success. What is the oldest and most distinctive religion in Africa? Please, my funny guys, please don't say, isn't it Scientology, right? The religion that Tom Cruise belongs to? Their headquarters is in Hollywood. Like, that's true, but it has nothing to do with Africa of hundreds of years ago. Okay, so don't be funny. Next one is 8. Okay, we try to stretch this first because they're transforming on me quite quickly. Okay, we'll leave that a twosie. Reading the question, large portions of Africa maintain links or connections to the larger world. How? What was their technique? And don't say it was Western Union, okay? Or, oh, they probably had websites. There was no computer at that time. So let me give you a few to answer those. And then we shall proceed. Okay, there are 2 there, so. Okay, hopefully you're getting that. All right, I'll head for the eraser now. Confident you guys have tackled that stuff. Is that my pencil? I don't want the pencil. Don't I want the eraser? Or do I want a shot of whiskey? No, okay, I'll settle for the eraser. Okay, repeating 7. What is the oldest and most distinctive religion in Africa? 8. Large portions of Africa maintain links or connections to the larger world. How? And it was not by websites. All right, let's go back to the material. We ended here with the end of Ghana. All right. So now, I'm sorry, the trans-trade sub-Saharan. Boy, I'm slipping. Okay. So now let's head into Ghana. This should be interesting. So it's getting warm again. Let me turn on the aircon. Starting heat wave. Okie dokie. Ghana. Ghana, the first of these kingdoms, endured or survived for at least 500 years before it fell apart in the 11th century as a result of a combination of events, including the onslaught of a Muslim jihad. Jihad is a holy war, so the Arabs declared a holy war on Ghana and tried to take it out, and this contributed to them actually losing their kingdom. Its exact origins are conjectural, which means people can only guess, and I guess that's why, since they didn't have written materials, the actual exact time frame has been lost. But the Soninke people probably founded it sometime in the 1st century CE, perhaps as early as 400. Its kings established a monopoly of trade, which means they were the only ones in charge of it, in gold obtained from a mining region to the southwest of Ghana on the Senegal River at a location called Pure. There's a second part, okay, Pure. So the kingdom grew and became a regional power after it began dealings with the Muslims to the north in the 8th century. Ghana was a title given to its divine king, who ruled through a network of regional officials in an area that at one point reached the size of Texas. Kumbi Saleh, the capital town, was sufficiently impressive that sophisticated Muslim geographer al-Bakri spent some time describing it in a well-known travel and sightseeing guide of the 11th century. The Muslims, Arabic, and Berber were influential in Ghana, and for that matter, in most of the Sudanese West African kingdoms that followed. The largely agrarian peoples of the Sudan, so that means farmers, believed in nature and ancestor spirits. But many experienced little difficulty converting to the monotheistic, which means only one God, doctrines of Islam that Berber merchants and missionaries introduced. Like the earlier Christians of Rome, the missionaries concentrated their efforts on the upper class, usually in the towns where trade flourished. By adopting the new doctrine, their African merchant partners quickly gained advantages. Look at this. Adopting the new religion gave them some business advantages. And other things, like here, literacy, the ability to read and write, access to new commerce, which is access to new business, and financial connections. A written law code, the Sharia, that helped facilitate commerce, business, or make business easy. And access to the Muslim trade network that already extended across Africa and Asia. Wow. The Muslims introduced their concept of law and administration, as well as religious beliefs. Kings who chose to continue their traditional religions often relied on Muslim advisors for political and administrative advice. Okay, so I just read Ghana, so I got to have at least one question on it, okay? Back to ye old whiteboard, grabbing a pencil. Question 9, so we're getting close to the end here. Here we go, another long question for me to answer or to write and you a short answer. Wow, not fair. Try to stretch this. Okay, 2Z is good enough there. Okay, which advantages did the Sudanese people get when accepting Islam? So again, a small reminder to, I'm gonna guess that they got more than one advantage. That's why this says advantages. And again, that's a heads up for the test, whether it's midterm or final. Many times I'll make a test and I'll have a question like this, ending in S, the plural, which advantages? And the student will answer with only one. So at least the student that was not paying attention. So the student that is gives me a nice little list and they get some nice juicy points. So as you answer this right now, it's probably more than one advantage. Okay. All right. So like I said, we're winding down, getting towards the end of the lesson, which is good. All right, you think you got a hold of that? I hope so, right? Sure, Vigorra, that's the way it is. Okay, let me go to the eraser. Right, repeating, which advantages did the Sudanese people get when accepting Islam? Please give me more than one. Okay. Erase time. Let's go back to the material. We ended here with the Muslim advisors for political and administrative advice. Now we're going to head on to Mali, and Mali is going to be the last country that I'm going to cover today. Okay, should be a good thing. Okay, and it looks like I might only have one question for Mali. Not to yay, because you normally don't want me to give you more than 10 questions, right? No. Okay. So proceeding, the Bure gold fields dried up soon after 1000 CE, which fatally, terminally weakened Ghana when also confronted by a Berber-led holy war against jihad in the 11th century. Its regional segments warred or fought with one another until one emerged under a semi-mythical king, Sundiata, who was powerful enough to subdue or beat most of the Western Sudan around 1250. This was the kingdom of Mali, which survived to about 1450. Mali was larger and better organized than Ghana, and the gold trade on which its kings depended, like those of the Ghanas before them, seems to have come from a new region closer to the headwaters of the Niger River, which lay to the south, the new kingdom in a region called Bitu. The original ruling clan, the Keitas, were nominally Muslim, but they ruled primarily as divine kings who governed with the help of their court officials and regional representatives. The adoption of stricter forms of Islam early in the 14th century by a new ruling clan, the Mansas, encouraged good relations with the Berbers, right? Because if you start really trying to follow the Islamic law, then the Berbers will say, hey, you're okay, you're one of us. If you're like, no, we're going to do our own thing, they're like, well, they use the term infidel, so they're like, you're not actually one of us, so we might declare another holy war. And whose trading activities were essential to the prosperity of the kingdom. So maybe they did it just to make sure that they had prosperity, right? Like we talked about the advantages earlier of the Ghanans becoming Islamic. Okay. Like the earlier Kush and Aksum, the Sudanese kingdoms were first and foremost the products of a strategic position for international trade. In this case, controlling movement along a lengthy stretch of the southern fringe. So here you see this desert and the trade with these all are these horses. Are they giant chihuahuas? No, they're camels. So here, the subheader, a Saharan salt caravan. So caravan is like a group of travelers that are going to trade. And I guess all these poor camels are carrying salt. They're going to Mali. The foundation of the Sudanic empires was the Saharan trade. As in China, salt was an important commodity in the diet of most West Africans. So it was highly valued. It was mined from the Saharan oases and then transported south to the Niger port cities like Timbuktu. There it was traded for gold, ivory, and slaves. Okay. Just checking where I be here. Okay, of the Sahara allowed them to monitor or watch the movements of trade goods from sub-Saharan to North Africa and on to both Europe and the East. Both Ghana and Mali relied heavily on taxes imposed on the Saharan traders and three vital commodities, gold, and here's the salt again, and slaves. Although the king had other means of support, these taxes made it possible to support a hierarchy of governing officials and chiefs and a large army that included both infantry and cavalry units. African gold was essential to Roman and medieval European commerce, as well as to the Muslim world. Gold ore was rare in Europe, but it was found in large quantities in parts of sub-Saharan Africa that were controlled by Western Sudanese merchants and those of Swahili city-states like Kilwa in East Africa. Sounds almost like that health food, quinoa, right? Which I tried. I don't care that it's healthy. It tastes like crap. So I'm not eating that anymore. Salt was almost as prized as gold in the ancient world. Although it was necessary, it was a necessity, excuse me. Supplies were limited in most areas except near the sea. And it was difficult to transport without large losses. So this happens in modern business too. They can transport and make a good amount of money, but they're also going to have large losses. Kind of a rough business to get into. This made salt highly valuable, and salt pans and oases like Tagaza and Tassili on the southern side of the Sahara were major sources. Go. Slaves were common in African markets long before the Europeans began the Atlantic slave trade. So again, you know, as they always talk about, well, you know, Europeans started the slave trade and then slaves were brought to America later too. This was quite common, this slavery in Africa way before that even started. So I don't know how you want to look at that. European, African, and Muslim cultures had no scruples or morality about slave trading or possession in this epoch or time frame. As in every other part of the ancient world, slavery was an accepted consequence of war, debt, and crime, which means a lot of times soldiers that fought for a losing army and they were taken captive, they became slaves, especially in the Islamic world. That was very famous for you becoming a slave, being an ex-soldier of the enemy. Being captured in raids by hostile neighbors was reason enough for enslavement. So here's even, they just raid your village and they take you and they say, okay, now you're a slave. Large number of slaves passed northward through Ghana and Mali, bound for collection points on the Mediterranean coast. From there, they were traded all over the known world. The Kingdom of Mali expanded by military conquest in the 13th century until it came to dominate much of West Africa. Early Africa's most noted ruler, the far-traveled Mansa Musa, ruled from 1307 to 1332, so 25 years. He extended the kingdom as far north as the Berber towns in Morocco. Wow, now you're getting close to Europe. And eastward to include the Great Saharan trading post of Timbuktu. Perhaps 8 million people lived under his rule, 8 million, at a time when the population of England was only about 4 million. Interesting information. Okay. And this will be our last reading right here. So get excited, folks. Yeah, yeah. That's what we're talking about, baby Bubba. Okay. Like his immediate predecessors or people that came before him, Mansa Musa was a Muslim. And in 1324, he made the pilgrimage to the holy place in Arabia. So if you remember our topic on Islam, that's in Medina, right? His huge entourage, which means he took a bunch of people that carried him like a king, laden with gold, staffs, and plates, entered Cairo like a victory procession and made an impression on the people that became folklore, that became like a almost a myth type story. Thanks to Mansa Musa's support, Islam gained much ground in West Africa during his lifetime. So people wanted to emulate him. So they're like, well, I got to be a Muslim to do that. Thereafter, the religion gradually passed through the upper classes to the common people. Since then, the Muslim presence in sub-Saharan Africa has been growing slowly for many generations. It has had almost the same impact there as Christianity did in the Germanic kingdoms. Much African law, social organization, and literature, as well as many political institutions, stem or come from it. Mansa Musa and his successor, Mansa Sulaiman, especially encouraged scholarship. And Musa founded a madrasa, university, at the famous Sankore Mosque in Timbuktu. The city gradually gained fame as a center of Islamic book production, as well as trade. So, just to prove it to you. See, that's it. Gotta go to previous. Okay, so I have one last question because that'll be 10. I don't want to be too unkind. Let me grab a pencil. One last question. This will be question 10. Final one for the day. Let me try to stretch this baby one last time to make a onesie. Can I do it? Wish me luck. Ooh, Gigi me. Okay, good deal. So here we go. I'll read it. How far did Mali's military conquests, victories, dominate? So how far on the map? Again, my funny guys on saying, yeah, I think he came up through Mexico, and then he defeated San Diego, and then he defeated Los Angeles, and then he stopped around San Francisco. That's not what I'm asking, okay? Those places didn't even exist then. So let me give you a few on that. So I hope everybody has a good week, you know. Do what they need to do. Keep hanging out, get your shots. And we got to fight through this COVID thing. You know what I mean? Jelly bean. Okay. So, like I said, it's only one question. So I think you got that. Let me get the eraser. Repeating, how far did Mali's military conquest dominate? Give me the country. Okay. All right. So now I have to actually stop sharing. Oops, there we go. There we go. Hey, how you doing? All right, so again, I wish you well. We've done with Africa this week for 7/26/21. And I shall see you next week, and it will be August. And remember, that is the time that I feel from August to December goes the fastest. Okay. Thank you much, and take care, everyone. Bye-bye.